Deep Rob here, and in this video I'm going to look at Pamela's new workout and how it can be the kind of the fundamental kind of heart of your modular. I can do this for lots of different things, but it's really good for rhythmic stuff and, you know, drums, that sort of thing. So off screen just over here I have ALM's Squid sample player. It does other things as well, but for this purpose we're going to use it as an 8-channel sample player, and I've got loaded into that a Lindrum sample pack which ships with it, but I really love the sound of it. It sounds like ace. And I'm taking the mix out into the ES9, which is hooked up to Logic, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how we can use Pamela's new workout to drive that and how we can generate some patterns, because you don't necessarily have to have a pattern sequencer or, you know, like a step sequencer that you would normally think of. We'll have another look in the next video at using something like Erica Synths drum sequencer for doing a similar thing, but I wanted to show you how you can do it all within, you know, this tiny map space. What is that? It's probably like 10 HP or something. Okay, so I'm going to let's have a quick run through. I'll press play, and you can see that the 8 lights, which are my 8 output channels, are all beating in sync, and they're running at 116 BPM. Now, let's start off with a kick. So if I just take the output and I put it into the input of channel 1, that's my kick. This is fine, this is all well and good. But let's take a second channel and I'll put that into the second input in Squid. And what we'll find is that the snare and the kick are going to go at the same time, because you can see that the triggers or the gates are going out at exactly the same point on the beat. Now, we don't want that, obviously, so I'm going to turn this until I get to number 2. And if I just click in the control here, you can see that the modifier there, which is at the moment set to ×1, is something I can adjust. So I'm going to bring this down to divided by 2, so that now the gate amount of this is going to run at half the speed of channel 1. So I'll just click that in to engage. Already 10 times better. So you can imagine what you can do with this, and now you can also, you can take this down more than divided by 2. This will go down to divided by, wow, never gone that far, 384, 512, and then you can go down to like CVs and stuff as well. So let's go back to divided by 2, like so, and we'll take a third channel, which I'll send to channel 3 of Squid. So let's just plug that in here. You just heard that being triggered. What we'll do here is I'll just play it again. Not in itself a bad thing, but let's have a look at how we can adapt that. So we need to move on to channel 3 here in the screen, click the button in, and I'm going to multiply this by 2. So this is going to be going double the speed of the kick. Just engage. Okay, sounds good. But let's add something just a little bit more. It's not going to be random, but it will add that feeling of kind of just almost humanized playing. It's not going to be quite that, but let's plug in channel 4 and we'll take that. I'm going to put that into, which I think is the kind of cowbell type sound from that Lindrum pack. I'll just play it a second. Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to move to channel 4. Now I could come in here and I could say divided by 4. But to my mind, that still feels a little bit kind of tied to the grid, and it's all very regular, and there's no kind of movement to it. Everything's kind of just bang, bang, bang. It's all divided, whatever the word is. Yeah, divided by this BPM, which is fine, and we want it to be like that, but we don't want it to be kind of quite so strictly adhering. So let's have a look at what we can do here. So I'm going to just take that back to times by 1, and I'm going to, where am I? I want to be on 4. times by 1, like so. And then if I press and hold, I have some extra options inside here. Now, you can see here I have E step. Now this is for Euclidean pattern generating. Now I could do this on here using Euclidean circles, but I think let's just stick to using what is essentially just, I think this is what, 10 HP, something like that. A small module that could fit into pretty much any rig, and this, because PAM can do so many other things as well, I think it's a good place to start. Like I said, we'll look at a drum sequencer after, which is, you know, probably 6 times the size, and it has a slightly different application. Much better for kind of live performances and changing your pattern on the fly. But for now, let's look at some Euclidean patterns. So I have the step count. At the moment this is set to 0. I'm going to put this to 7. So it's going to be off the grid. So at the moment you'd think of like 8 or 16 would kind of make sense for a sequence of drums. We'll go for 7. So I will then move this forward to triggers. Now this is where Euclidean pattern generation gets it's not complicated, but it's kind of, what it's doing is it's taking that step sequence, or that sequence of 8 steps, and it's finding a trigger that kind of is closest to the neatest division of that step count. So because we have a step count of 7, I'm going to set our triggers to say 3, because that's harder to divide. What we'll find is it actually skips a few, so you end up with this pattern that kind of, it feels like it's more humanized and it's more played by feel, even though it's, you know, mathematically sticking to the same grid and everything, and the BPM is the same. That's what's going to happen. So let's just press play. So I hope you understand what I'm kind of trying to say there. It's on the beat and it's exactly where you want it to be, but it's just got that kind of a feel of it's breaking out slightly. It feels like that's a one-note fill almost. And obviously you can go back to the main menu here, and if I wanted to, you know, have fewer of them again, I could divide it by 2 or 2.5. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, well that was 2.6, was it? Okay, that's why it sounded slightly off. Let's just go back to 1 for this, and then I'll move on to the next channel, which I want to explore a little bit. Okay, so let's take our, I'm going to go for the 5th output here, and I'm going to plug that into that channel there, which will sound like this. Oh, maybe that's not the one I wanted. There we go. So that's a hand clap. Now, we don't want that being, or I don't, well, for this pattern, I don't want that being so regular. So let's go to number 5, and I'll leave it at 1 for now. I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to change the wave for the gate. Now, let's move forward. So we've got gate, we've got triangle, sine, envelope, and random. So I'm going to use random for this, and you'll see, I don't know, hopefully you can just see the light between the two here, so you'll see what happens. Okay, so what's happening there? Okay, so what's happening is that the output is taking a random voltage. Now, the input voltage needed by the sample player needs to be at a certain level, which I think is 5 volts. I might be wrong about that. And because this is a random generated voltage amount that's coming out of this here, even though it's sending it and it's changing it every beat, it needs to hit that tolerance to be able to spark off and trigger the sample to play. So with that in mind, if you imagine that the voltage being generated is kind of skipping around, it's only going to hit them up here, even if it's playing, you know, even though it is outputting voltages at lower levels each beat. So if it's too few or too many, you can change the division or the multiplication of the outputting clock. Okay, now the big difference between using this random waveform and the Euclidean patterns is that the Euclidean is maths based, so you can predict it. If you're good at maths and you can do those kind of divisions in your head, then you can work out where it's going to be. I'm going to go back to the Euclidean in a second just to show you one other thing that it does. But the random is truly random. So as much as it's sticking to the grid, when you get the trigger fired is truly random. You can't predict that, which I really like for things like hand claps or even for some like toms. I think if you want to have that, it always reminds me of like mid-80s Fleetwood Mac if you have the tom hits kind of at various points and then you spread them in the stereo field, which is something you can do quite easily with this kind of a setup. Anyway, back to Euclidean. So let's go out of this back into channel 4, click and hold. And I'm going to move this forward 1, so it says E rotate, and at the moment it says step 0, 0. So this is essentially kind of your reset point for where the Euclidean part of this setup is going to start. If you imagine, so if you look at this, I don't know if you can see this, if you imagine the steps being put around a circle instead of along a grid, and the circle has 7 different points, you might have the 12 o'clock point as your trigger A, but you can rotate it like this along those 7 steps, so you might have it start at 4. And that, if you think about how the maths of this works, will change where the missed beats are going to be. So I'll just play it. And then I'll change this to, let's say, 4. So this is 4 out of 7 steps. So the 4th step is now where the sequence is going to start. So this is, because this is such a basic kind of drum patch at the moment, and a drum pattern might be harder to tell, but if you compare the cowbell to the snare, that's probably the easiest way to hear that. Okay, so that's kind of the fundamentals of what I wanted to show you, really, just how to set up using PAMs and samples. Well, this doesn't have to be samples, it could be drum voices or whatever you want it to be. Something to keep in mind is that you could also use something like this random waveform, or the random voltage that's coming out of well, any of these ports. They'll all do the same. You could put that into an accent, or you could, you know, and that would generate a random accent on a random beat, which is also something that's quite fun. And if you attenuate that voltage a little bit so that it doesn't go haywire, you can get some really humanized kind of playing, which is really nice. So let's change how we're doing this now. I'm going to keep the same setup for squid sample, and I'm just going to pull these triggers like so, show you a different way of triggering some of these sounds. So I'm just going to pull these. Should I keep 3? We'll keep the kick. So marbles is it's just a different method of sending triggers, and you can generate various kind of quite cool patterns using it. So if you look here, this T2 in the center of these 3, because marbles is split into 2 sides, we're looking at the left hand side here. We have a continuous kind of on the clock beat here, and the clock speed, it can be fed in from something like PAMS or a master clock elsewhere, or you can use this dial here as your clock, and you can change the speed of it by 3 different versions here using that button in there. Okay, so let's take our kick, which we know we want to be kind of so that's setting our rhythm. That's kind of giving us our kind of basis of understanding what the rhythm's going to be. So I'm going to take the second one, which is a snare, and I'm going to put it into T1. And I'll do the same for T3 using the hi-hats. I might just speed this up so it's easier to hear. Okay, so what that's doing is it's playing this on every beat, and then it's doing what we would call a coin toss to decide where the next beat is going to be played. Is it going to go to T1 or T3? And again, there are some different options for how it's going to work this out, but we'll leave it as a coin toss, which is essentially the branches module, which you can just see here, but this has 2 channels of it. And this is kind of a bias switch, so you can say if it's at 12 o'clock, the coin toss is going to go equally one way or the other. It's a 50-50 chance, but you can bias it. If you want a little bit more hi-hat, then I could put it over here. Let's do that and see what it sounds like. Okay, and if I want it the other way, if I wanted to have just a bit more snare and a bit less hat. So I prefer it with a bit more hat. Now, what you can also do with this module is you can freeze the trigger side and the pitch side as well. You can freeze it. If it does a bit of a pattern you really like, you can turn it. I'll turn the speed back up so it's playing, and then I'll find a bit that I like and we'll press the freeze button. Okay, so that's just a little look at how you can use something like marbles for generating patterns that are predictable as well as random all at the same time. And that's the joy of marbles. It's really good for generating very kind of musical patterns that are based in randomization, but work perfectly well for, you know, something that's a bit more repeatable as well. Okay, this is Erica Synths drum sequencer. I should probably just zero this out. Like so. Okay, so I'm going to take my output 1 or trigger 1, put it into my kick drum, and I'll put the trigger 2 into the snare, and trigger 3 I'm going to put into the hi-hats. Now, this is, left a couple of those on. This is a more traditional drum sequencer. Now, the nature of the keys make it really easy to do things on the fly. Now, you have lots of different options, which I'm going to ignore. I'm not going to look at any accents or any of the LFOs, any of that stuff. Or the divisions, because you can do that all here. You can change your scale, your lengths, all that sort of stuff. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my kick. So if I do trigger select, make sure it's on channel 1. If I just want a 4 to the floor, dum, 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 I can just do that. like so. Okay, makes sense, doesn't it? Now, if I go to trigger 2 for my snare, let's try and repeat the pattern we did using Pam's. So I would want a snare on beats 1 and 3. Did I even do that in the right place? Yeah. Let's just divide that and have it only on beat 1 then, see what that sounds like. Okay, so you can see how you can start doing stuff quite complex and quite interactively, which is the joy of using these kind of sequences. So I'm going to go to the hi-hats now, to make sure I'm in there, and I'll just start adding these in. Okay, I'm going to take the open hat, and I'm going to put that into my trigger 4. So if I take trigger 4, actually let's just look at my trigger 3 again. Right, trigger 4. I'll press play and I'll just add these in as I'm doing it. And let's go for just grab a cable. I'll do the cowbell. Let's do that in channel 6. So if I do trigger 6, which is that one, press play and I'll just add some cowbells in while you watch. Okay, so that's how you would go about kind of a more live-based performance. I was thinking about how different people set up different rhythms as I do this, and I don't think I can cover them all because there are just so many different ways. It might have been worth at some point, and maybe I'll do this in the future, looking at how to create drum voices using things like VCOs and VCAs and envelopes and all that sort of thing. But for the scope of this video, I wanted to be just to show you how you can use different tools to create your patterns. And I think those 3 ways are probably the main key ways that you could do it. Obviously you could use MIDI in if you had a MIDI converter, and you could set up all your sequences in your DAW and then feed them into the different voices. But for now, I hope that's been of some use. Please do drop a comment and just let me know what you think, whether you've got a better way of doing it, or if some of this was new to you, whether it's useful or not. And see you all again in another video. Thanks very much.